And good evening, sir. I should say good afternoon on a Saturday afternoon. Sorry for the little bit of a little break. Work was kind of getting in the way at the moment, so this is the first opportunity I've had to carry on making this series of YouTube videos. Now, further on to part 1 of the Raptor, we're now moving on to part 2. And for the Fleet Somraw, in this one, we're going to be discussing the bridge officers and duty officers that I use on this particular build. And obviously in part 3 we'll be moving on from there to the skill set that I use on this tactical KDF captain. So without further ado, let's move on to the bridge officers. Now, for those that are not familiar or not aware, the Fleet Somraw vessel has a full commander tactical, a lieutenant commander tactical, an ensign engineering, and a lieutenant engineering, and a lieutenant science. Now, this particular ship and build is set around temporal warfare, and as I said before in my previous videos, this build is kind of a loose build ready to go into the temporal destroyer on my KDF ship. Unfortunately, I've not got around to getting an OV yet still, so I'm still using the Fleet Somraw, but I'm also having quite a lot of fun recently with the Bird of Prey as well, which I'll be doing as a different video, which will have a different setup. So yeah, without further ado, let's move on to the bridge officers. So the powers I've got at the moment, in the full commander slot I use beam overload 1, mainly because I use beam overload so that I can make use of the chronoton dual beam banks. And those that aren't aware of, not only do I get anti-proton damage, there's always a percentage chance of actually reducing the flight speed and turn rate of a target. Now, I could use a higher version of beam overload, but because of the power drain levels when you use overload, I'm quite careful. So I tend to favour just beam overload 1 on this vessel. Now, in the full commander slot, I'm using 2 versions of cannon rapid fire. I know some people favour scatter volley, and scatter volley does have its uses, but I prefer rapid fire personally. And I've got rapid fire 1 and rapid fire 3. With my duty officer layout, I've managed to basically get the cooldown significantly reduced on these, so it helps enormously that I can run both of these. And bearing in mind that my primary offensive weapon are the 2 dual heavy anti-proton cannons, so I may not do the highest DPS, I may not do the highest anti-proton damage, but I certainly get consistent figures when I'm attacking. And then lastly, I've got in the full commander slot attack pattern Omega for the Omega Strike, which basically gives you the damage resistance rating, a plus to the damage that you do, increases your flight speed and turn rate, it gives you that immunity to movement debuffs and disables, and also gives you a plus 25.6 to your defense strength. This is quite useful if, for example, you're using a Bird of Prey, which I'll go into in a different video, but the AJS set and attack pattern Omega gives you quite an impressive amount of defense, as does speed as well. If you've got more power going to your engines, you've got a higher defense kicking in. Now, in the Lieutenant Commander slot, I've got Tactical Team 1, which I've got a duty officer that's reducing that, but also it gives you a plus to your attack patterns, and also gives you a plus to your energy weapon damage, your projectile weapon damage, but also redistributes your shields. Quite useful, this. In PvP, for example, or in some heavy STS, you might want to run 2 tactical teams. That's entirely up to you, really, but I find 1 tactical team is more than enough. Next, I use attack pattern beta for the ability to debuff a target, so it gives a minus 28.4 to all damage rating, so it's only a very short debuff, but it actually surprisingly comes in quite useful. And then last but by no means least, I've got the high yield torpedo 3, which gives me an impressive amount of torpedo damage. It makes my chronoton torpedoes do some very decent damage, but it also buffs the temporal disruption device and gives me basically a better torpedo for doing damage. However, it is very slow and it is destructible, so you have to bear that in mind. And then in the Lieutenant Engineering, I've got Immensely Powered Shields 1 with Structure Integrity Field 1. Reason I went for this is Engineering Team would interfere with Tactical Team, and I tend to find Tactical Team is more useful. And as a Raptor, she's kind of not a cruiser, she's going to be intermixing it, so I find, because of the way Structure Integrity Field 1 cools down and recharges, it comes up a lot quicker, and it means that I can use this to heal my ship as well as using Tactical Team, so there's no interference there. And then in the Ensign ability, I've got emergency power to weapons 1. Reason is that basically I'm cycling between emergency power to shields and emergency power to weapons. What it's going to do is basically, as you notice here, the cooldown drops automatically to 15 and then cools down. So what I tend to do is I alternate between the two, which is quite useful. Between these two. I don't use a warp core engineer on this particular ship. I could do, which would mean I could cycle between these and increase my power levels further. This particular build doesn't use that, unlike my cruiser builds. So this one's just there so that I can alternate between the two. So it means I'm basically keeping decent power to my shields and keeping the decent power to my weapons, especially if I'm using beam overload, because that's what drains my energy on this ship the most. So I cycle between those quite frequently. And also the thing to consider with structural integrity field is I also get a damage resistance rating as well, so it acts a bit like polarize the hull. It's giving me extra to my defense values as well as healing the ship. And then in the lieutenant slot, I've got hazard emitters 1 for the either team heal or for the heal for myself, which is a greater heal that's equivalent to my engineering team that I could have had. And I also get a damage resistance rating as well, so I get a plus for what I'm getting hit with. So quite useful, that one, definitely worth having. And then last but no means least, I've got the transfer shield strength 2, which is basically regenerating my shield, so it's an extra shield heal. My rule of thumb is here, it means that I've got 2 shield heals and I've got 2 hull heals available to me to use. And in combination, you could use structural integrity field as well as hazard emitters, and then I'm getting a bonus to my defense values in the sense that I'm getting resistance rating to what damage I take. So definitely worth having that. Now that's pretty much what my bridge officers are, really. These are the abilities that I'm using. Just to let you have a look, these characters have not been fully outfitted yet. In fact, they're still using quite an old ground kit, which I need to update. Once I get a moment, I'll be actually updating these with the fleet stuff, fleet ground equipment that I can get. I just haven't done so yet, but it is on my list to do. And I've just got a standard Gorn in there with nothing particularly special. It's decent on the ground. And then my other tactical officer, she's again nothing major really there. She's only used actually for space abilities, I don't use her for ground. And then one of my engineers, which would be 1313, is the unique Borg officer. Again, she's a space one, I don't use her in ground. One of the extra abilities she has is efficient, which gives me the plus 7.5 to my warp core efficiency. I like having that, it's quite useful. I'll squeeze whatever I can out of my shields. And the character I use is actually one of my ground characters, but again, nothing too special with these ones. I've not really gone out more like my Odyssey class ship. And then obviously I've got another Orion in there. So again, nothing too special, but they do the job. So that's the bridge officer configuration. Let's move on to the duty officers that I use. Excuse me. And at the moment I've only got blues in this at the moment. I will get around to getting purples, I just haven't done so yet. And as you can see, I'm pretty much outfitted for bear. In other words, I'm out to make the most out of my offensive abilities. So I'm running a purple con officer, which is giving me the reduction in tactical team, always useful as I said before. I've then got 2 energy weapon officers slotted, which are for cannon special attacks. And basically it's a 50% chance to reduce the recharge time by 7.5 seconds on my cannon abilities. So when I use my cannon abilities, it basically reduces the cooldown. As you saw there, abilities actually dropped, so that both of these, with those 2 duty officers for cannons, basically means I'm almost always going to guarantee that I get a reduction in the ability. So at the moment, both of these recharge basically at the same time. Now, it doesn't always work, but as you can see there, I got a reduction of effect there. So again, it kept the cooldown down, so it's bringing it down. So on this occasion, I might have to actually use rapid fire 1 instead of being able to fire off rapid fire 3, which is fine. So it goes in between there, so I could use that, brings it down to 15-second cooldown. That's dropped down, so it becomes available again. Basically, it's a way of keeping these, because cannon's my main abilities for the anti-protons, it keeps these running quite nicely, so that now I can actually use rapid fire 3 again. Rapid fire has come down, and you see both of these have actually gone back down to the same cooldown, so they're going to come back up pretty much at the same time on the cannons. Now, one of the other ones I've got is the ability for another energy weapons officer, and this one's for beam special attacks, which is a 50% chance of reducing my cooldown on beam overload. Now, The dual beam bank is not my primary weapon, my two cannons are, but it's always useful to have at least that dual beam bank coming up quickly, especially because of the bonuses I get with the dual chronoton beam banks. They're actually very useful beam banks, so obviously when I hit beam overload, there's a 50% chance it will reduce the cooldown. Again, it doesn't always kick in, it's only a percentage chance, it's a 50% chance it will, a 50% chance it won't, but my cannon abilities are still there and available for me to use, so I alternate between those. And then last but certainly no means least, I've got a blue damage control officer, which is basically a 30% chance to reduce recharge time by 30% on any emergency power to subsystem. So basically when I use emergency power to shield 3, I get a bit of a cooldown reduction, and then obviously this will kept on the universal 15 seconds. When this frees up I can hit this. But what it does mean, it's reducing the time down a little bit, and in a few moments when this pops up to 0, I can hit emergency power to weapons. Pretty much reset me to 15, but because of that one ability it means I can keep these two cycling quite nicely, so my weapons and my shields are constantly getting their energy levels topped up. Now that's pretty much the duty officer build for this particular ship, and I might as well show you the ground ones just so you can have a look at it. I've got a purple and a blue assault squad officer for reduction on when a grenade is thrown. The purple one gives you a 33% chance to reduce the recharge time by 5 seconds. And the blue one gives you a 33% chance to reduce the recharge time by 4 seconds whenever a grenade is thrown. My character tends to use grenades quite a bit here and there. The last one I've got is an assault squad officer again. This one gives you heal to nearby teammates, so it's a 6% chance of giving a plus 25 hit points to the team when rally cry is used, and a 6% chance of up to 5 nearby fallen allies are revived. It's a small thing, it might not work, but hey, it's in there. Never know if you don't try these things. Now I've also got 2 medical officers slotted. One of these is a 20% chance to gain 1,300 temporary maximum hit points for 30 seconds, it's a 20% chance. And my other one is a little bit of a throwback to my biobed days when I was using biofunction monitors, but I've kept this in because it's quite useful. Basically it's when in combat there's increases the crew recovery rate. The officer increases the crew recovery rate in combat when the crew is below 75%. So if my ship gets below 75% crew, then I get a plus 150% crew recovery rate while in combat. So this is quite useful. So because basically my crew gets to recover. So that's pretty much it for my bridge officers and duty officers. So that's the end of part 2, and we'll move on to part 3 a little bit later when we discuss the skill tree. Okay, so I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Thank you.